Hello and welcome. My name is Idris, and today we're going to be looking at tips for designing your props specifically for 3D printing. So, a little while ago, we just finished watching Little Witch Academia with my family, and my daughter asked me if I could make her a wand. So, I did. Um, this model was done inside of 3ds Max. It has absolutely nothing to do with ZBrush, but it's easier to show things off in ZBrush for you guys. Uh, so, first of all, tip number one is that when you design something for printing to be used as a prop or for anything in real life, you should always use what you have lying around for your print. So for this print, I found inside my workshop a little piece of plastic rod. And since it's going to be handled by a child, she will be hitting things up and it's likely the print will break. So to avoid that, I will be using this core. So if you're serious about going into 3D printing, you should buy a caliper, and using your caliper, you should measure the things you have lying around. So it's great to reinforce your model with things you have lying around. You don't have to 3D print everything. If you can recycle, reuse anything you have, the better. So for this project, this little plastic rod. But you could also use anything to make pegs, to make use screws, anything you can use from real life that is not 3D printing that you can add to your model, the better. So this will be our support. So I took my rod, measured it, and I built my design around it. So this is a template of the actual thing I have right beside me. And then I modeled everything using screen caps and other goodies I found on the internet. Now, tip number two, since we're going to print this on an FDM printer, the printer is too small to print this entire piece in one go. So I'll need to cut it, and most likely will you. And the best way to make your cuts is to hide them in logical places. As a kid, I had toys, like most of you, or I hope, and often you would see where the mold, two parts of the mold would fit. There would be a seam there and would be very distracting. I always hated having those seams everywhere. So it's nice for you to place your seams somewhere where they'll be hidden. For instance, if you look at this wand, here at the bottom of this wand is a good place to hide it. Here on top, here as well. Any places on your design where there's a drastic change in geometry, like here, or if there's a drastic change in material, that's also a very good place to place your cuts. So this hilt is in a different material as the rest of the model. The rest is supposed to be a kind of metallic piece. So this is a nice way to break your model. So place them in logical places. And as you can see, I had to cut my the middle of my wand because this wouldn't fit inside my printer. So this is the only concession I had to make, is I had to cut this in the middle. But that's the only cut I will have to clean up afterwards. So tip number two, hide your seams in logical places. Tip number three is design them in a way they will align and fit together. So this is why we used a core. for to strengthen our piece, but also to help align everything together. So you can see that the core goes a bit inside of the hilt, goes through this part, the entire part of the wand, and inside that top part. That way, when we finish printing and we put everything along the rod, everything will align and fit together. The rod will help keep everything tight and make sure that our seams are properly aligned. So that's the alignment part. And since my rod isn't long enough, I have designed this button at the end to be a big peg. So you can see this, I could have made it flat and just stuck it to this piece, but there would be no way to line it, and there would be no way for to make this bottom part fit with the rest of the hilt. So using this as a big nail, a big peg, I can pressure fit and align everything at the same time. So you won't see it on the final piece. But when you design your piece, it's nice to think about how you can use your model, use your design to make it practical, to make it useful, to make it, if you can give something a function, it's always good. So this little piece of detail is also a peg that holds everything, holds the whole bottom part together, like so. So it goes through this piece and then goes through the hilt. Now we're going to jump to tip number 4, because tip number 3 and tip number 4 overlap for this top part. So tip number 4 is design your model thinking while you think about printing orientation. So the way a 3D printer, FDM 3D printer works is that it lays down a layer of plastic, then rises up and builds up the volume every time it rises. So it makes a layer, lifts up, makes another layer, lifts up, and that's how it builds the volume. So it's very, very bad with overhangs, because it's not, you're lifting from an empty space. So you're lifting from an empty space. So to compensate for this, it has to make, you have to use support, and the support will use more plastic, more time, and you'll have to clean the surface where the support is in contact with your model. So it's not ideal, and when you have big overhangs like this, it's not a great idea. And now we have also overhangs on this other part, and it's not going to be in contact, since it's not going to be in contact with the build platform, the bed. So we'll have to build supports from the inner part of the model, so it'll be even more cleanup. So if you can avoid any overhangs in your model, the better. But it's not something you can always do. So for this part, I've decided to cut it into 2 pieces. That way, I am going to I'm going to set it on the build plate like this. So it builds up this way, vertically this way. So I have to print it 2 times. And to make sure these 2 pieces align together, I have added, I have added this little piece as well. So this is going to be hidden, but when you put these 2 together and you fit them inside this hole, they should align back together and be as they were on the concept. And also I made an extra cut. You can see you can see inside here there's another hole for the core. So once everything is aligned, once the top part is aligned, they will also be aligned with the core. So everything should be aligned with the wand once you put them together. So this is tip number 3: design pieces inside your model to help them align. And tip number 4: think about orientation to avoid overhangs. Like so. So for instance, you can see that this top part has a big overhang here, big steep slope on this side, but if I put it on the bed on this side, this slope is a lot more manageable. So this is something the printer should be able to do without support. And there's a big flat surface for the bed to help with the adhesion. Well, here it's a small surface, so we're just going to put it on the print bed, orienting this way, facing this way. So tip number 4: orient your pieces, design them thinking about how you're going to place them on the bed. And tip number 5 is going to encompass everything we talked about previously, is use as many parts as you can handle. So the more parts you have, the more options you have to orient them on the bed. Because you could completely print this part. You could completely print this part as a single piece, but you'll have overhangs, you'll have artifacts. So since we have a difference in materials, difference in parts, we can break them into these 4 parts, and that gives us more options to lay them flat on the bed. So that will give us a better quality. And if we want, we could print different parts in different resolutions. Since we're not printing everything at the same time, we could print a part in layer height of 0.1 millimeter, another one in 0.2 or 0.4 if we wanted to save some time on the hilt. Imagine you were going to wrap the hilt with leather. It's never going to be seen. You could print it very fast at 0.4, but you want the rest to be detailed because it's going to be mimicking metal. So more parts means better orientation, more options for print quality. It's going to be easier to paint every part separately. It's going to be easier to sand. If you're printing the entire piece at once and just the top part fails, you have to print it over again. But if it's in multiple parts, you can just reprint that part, or it's less likely to fail because it'll have to go less layers in height. So shorter print times, more manageable print times, less support, less cleanup. If your kid or yourself, when you go at a convention, you break your wand, you break your prop, you can just reprint that little piece that broke and fix your prop. So the more pieces you can use, the better. So this is a very stylized piece, so it's easy if you're making a very realistic gun or very intricate details. Having more parts will make it look better, but it might require maybe 200, 400 pieces, and that's not something you can easily manage. So use as many parts as you can handle, and that should make your life easier. But using many parts, you have to think about how each part has to fit together in the end. So you have to go back to the previous tips, making your cuts in logical places, and how to align them. So you could align them using the pieces you have on your model, or you could use pegs. You can key out connection points, and then use things you have laying around to make your keys. So that way, when you pressure fit your little piece of recycled utility inside your model, everything should align to that. So yeah, the more parts you have, the more you have to think about things, but the better your print will be. And that should wrap this up for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments. Share and subscribe, like this video, it helps, and I'll see you guys in another one.